from Prague, which is where David Oppenheim, one of our great benefactors, was chief rabbi, and I think the earliest known Jewish collector of books. And so you're from Prague, he was from Prague, and have you visited his grave?
Pardon me?
Have you visited his grave?
Yes, sure.
Wonderful. Okay, good to know. Right, well, thank you for doing this, and over to you.
Okay, good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for this opportunity to present what I'm doing. My research for over 10 years is about how Hebrew printed books were made, transferred, and read from the very beginning of printing until the year 1625. When we look at this topic, the Bodleian libraries here in Oxford are simply the most suitable place in the world for this work. This is especially because of two massive acquisitions the library made in the 19th century. They bought the private collections of Rabbi David Oppenheim of Prague, which included both manuscripts and printed books, and Hyman Josef Michael of Hamburg, from whom they bought just the manuscripts, while his printed books went to the British Library. Both of these collections were incredibly rich in manuscripts, especially those coming from Central and Eastern Europe during the 16th and 17th centuries. This is the exact period when Hebrew printing began to grow. The richness of this collection, along with the fact that you can study printed books and manuscripts side by side, makes the Bodleian collection of early modern Hebrew books the richest in the entire world. Oppenheim, who died in 1736, was the very first known Jewish collector of books. He wished to own all books printed or written in Hebrew script, which means that he collected not only scholarly tomes in Hebrew, but also ephemera in Yiddish, often not preserved elsewhere. He employed emissaries to buy books for him and employed librarians to curate his collection. Our first example, right here, is a manuscript to which Oppenheim's librarians added a custom title page featuring King David. This was a pun on the rabbi's name, David Oppenheim. Most Hebrew manuscripts do not have illustrations and are not even very beautiful, but there are exceptions. Our second example right here is a Sefer evronot, a richly decorated manual for calculating Hebrew calendar from 17th century Germany. Through the rest of my examples, I want to show three glimpses into how Hebrew printed books were produced in this period. These examples illustrate the great cultural importance of Hebrew printing, but they also show its major limitations. The first two examples illustrate the emergence of new specific audiences for printed books in Hebrew. Printers in the early modern period were very sensitive to the fact that different groups of people read books in Hebrew or in other Jewish languages like Yiddish or Ladino. The printers accommodated their production to cater to these different readerships. The famous Venetian printer Daniel Bomberg printed a book on Hebrew grammar by Abraham de Balmes in 1523 in two different versions. The first version, that's right here, was printed purely in Hebrew for Jewish readers. The second version, it's this exemplar, used the exact same tied-up pages, but the imposition now included added Latin pages. The Hebrew and Latin texts were printed side by side, and both were provided with cross-references in the margins. This Hebrew-Latin edition was directed to Christian students of Hebrew. The emergence of Jewish reading public, which included also readers who were not well-versed in Hebrew, is documented by an extremely rare bilingual Hebrew and Yiddish edition of the Book of Job, printed in Prague in 1597. While the Oppenheim copy is incomplete, we have here a crisp clean copy from the Duke Humfrey's library. And thank you, Alex, for bringing the exemplar from some caves. I don't know, it was not accessible directly, so thank you for that. The second set of examples, these two, show that early printing shaped Jewish texts in a way that lasts to this very day. Between the 1510s and the 1560s, printers published a number of core authoritative texts. For example, the Babylonian Talmud, which is actually a more central text for traditional Jewish study than the Hebrew Bible, was printed in a version which became seen as standardized already in 16th century. We can see here an early printed version of one of the Talmudic tractates in a beautiful Soncino edition of 1484, one of the 143 Hebrew incunabula. Similarly, between 1558 and 1560, two different versions of the Zohar, the foundational text of Kabbalah, were printed. We have here the Cremona edition, right here, from 1558. In both cases, Talmud and the two editions of the Zohar, the printers and editors had to shape the final text by choosing from different manuscript models. Before this, no single book of Zohar existed. There were just various layers of Zoharic literature in different manuscripts. In the case of the Talmud, the editors selected the specific commentaries that flank the sides of the main text, as you can see here, making important choices in what to include and what to leave aside. Today, it is exactly these textual versions established in 16th century print shops that are still reprinted and used in online applications, both in traditional study and modern research. However, as important as Hebrew printing was for 16th century Jewish culture, it also had major limits that historians often do not want to acknowledge. This is my final example. The total number of printed Hebrew books was actually rather small, with only about 2,500 editions printed up to the year 1625. To put that in perspective, during the same period, England printed over 30,000 of editions, Italy printed over 100,000, and Germany printed over 180,000 versus 2,500 in Hebrew letters. Jewish authors, editors, and publishers constantly complained in the introductions and notes of 16th century books about difficulties. They talk about delays or how they were forced to print only a part of what they originally planned. They also mention many projects that were completely aborted because they ran out of money or because readers simply lacked interest. So while the printing press did increase the number of copies available and transform how readers related to texts, the Jewish literary production remained rather isolated. There was very little openness to accept new genres or trends from the outside world and integrate them into Hebrew and Yiddish book culture. The printed book did tear down barriers within Jewish society, both horizontally and vertically. The barriers between different regional Jewish cultures mostly disappeared. Where regional differences used to dominate in the era of handwritten books, now virtually any printed book was available everywhere between Constantinople, Venice, and Krakow. Furthermore, texts like the Kabbalah, which used to be reserved only for small circles studying with a master, were now available for anyone to buy. Yet, many types of texts are almost completely absent from print, especially entertaining books and non-religious subjects, even like medicine. Of course, some Jewish scholars could and did read books on these subjects in Latin, German, or Italian. Also, the diversity of Hebrew texts circulating in manuscript form was actually somewhat higher than what was available in print. We can see this clearly in a medieval astronomical text called Surad Haaretz, or the form of the earth, by Abraham Barchia, a Hebrew work on astronomy. An incomplete version of this work was printed in Basel in 1547 by a Christian printer with Latin notes. That's this volume. Jewish students of astronomy knew the text, but the printed book was obviously not always available to purchase, and no printed edition meant for the Jews appeared. Because of this, a Jewish scribe actually copied the entire Christian printed book by hand, and that's what we see in this manuscript. In my research, in fact, I found several cases where Hebrew translations of astronomic texts were copied by hand in the 16th and 17th centuries, and the scribes took the diagrams directly from contemporary Latin or German printed editions of the same works. To conclude, I'd like to express at the end of my stay here in Oxford all my gratitude to the Bodleian Library for the fellowship, which enabled me to spend a whole month with this unique and splendid collection. And of course, I would like to say thank you to all the administrators. I now don't see with my reading glasses, and of course librarians upstairs and downstairs who assisted me during this and my previous stays in the library. Thank you.